Alright, moving on. We are doing the transmission next, so we're going to start right here, following along in section E1. It should be pretty straightforward. So we're just going to assemble as shown, remembering to include thread locker, as there is quite a bit of metal here. That side doesn't appear to matter. Those holes lined up nice and good. So there is one bearing that is shielded, but it's quite a small one. The rest are all shielded. No unshielded bearings, which is nice. I like to see all shielded bearings. I'm going to put that down. Let gravity hold it in place for us. Also, while I'm doing this, on the last step we did the Desert Lizard 100mm shocks with reservoirs. They didn't leak overnight, as this is the next day from the last video. However, I was looking, I thought that they came with multiple springs, and it looks like only the non-reservoir versions of those Desert Lizards come with multiple springs. So I'm probably going to end up buying the spring kit. That way I can run about 75% droop and 25% sprung. But I'm going to try it this way first for a while, see how it goes. I've never run the true full droop with the springs on the quote wrong side. So we'll run that for a while, but I am expecting to have to disassemble those and change springs out down the road. Alright, so we've got all three in, we've got thread locker on. Now when you're doing stuff like this, you always want to tighten in a star, although it's a triangle, so I guess it doesn't really matter here. The main thing is you want to make sure everything is setting in nice and smooth. So as we can see here, I think I grabbed the wrong screw, as I've got one sticking out. So we're going to back that guy out and put the right one in. It's a good thing that didn't have a bottom to it. Yep, that's definitely longer than the other one. Alright, yep. See, there's the difference. I'll put that guy back. I'm not using stainless here. We're deep inside the transmission. I'm not worried about this stuff rusting or anything like that. It's just easier to use the stuff that's in the bag than it is to go digging through the pile of screws. I'll have those for backup should I ever need them. Alright, that piece is done. Looks nice and level. Put that aside. Now we're going to build the next section up. I'll lay it out. Come right back. Alright, we've got everything laid out, and I can't stress enough, especially when you're doing transmissions, to lay things out as they are in the diagram. It helps keep things straight. We're going to build it from right to left here. Bearings pop in nice and easy. Come on, come back out. So we're gonna... Okay, so this one has to come in from this side. That's the trick. There's your trick. Alright, we are going to slot this pin in here. And it's gonna fall straight through, of course. This might require a pair of... Oh, wait. Oh, I got it. Okay. There we go. So, getting it right is a little tricky. Put it right like that, and then we're going to drop it in. But we have to do grease first. This needs a whole bunch of grease. So I'll get our grease. You know what? I don't have any toothpicks left, but I'm not going to be using these Allen keys for anything that came with it because they're just tiny and terrible. So I'm just going to use this to apply my grease. Oh. Okay, yeah, that's much easier. So I think the trick here on this is to simply put this gear on this side. Alright, see now that's nice and flush. Alright. So, my bearing looks okay. Oh no. Boy, this is a tricky piece. Alright, we're going to do it sideways now. And that's what you're looking for. Nice tight seal. I'll go back and clean that that grease off the case in just a minute. That's a 8 mil. Yep, this is the right one. So this piece goes in from right here to hold the whole thing together while we get to the next step. There we go. I'm going to set the next piece up. Alright, so next we're going to build the dig unit. I've got it laid out. Now there is an optional step here. If you are not going to be using a micro servo to have selectable dig, you need to use this little spacer. That puts it in four-wheel drive all the time and locks the whole system out. I am going to be using a Dig Servo, so we don't need that step. So, beginning our assembly, slot our bearing in. This is the first time I've built a Dig Servo, or a dig unit. None of my other rigs have dig. I mean, I only have this TRX4 Sport as far as other crawlers. Okay, and this one you need to line this black plate up with those two screw holes that way. And to get it to sit flush. So that's pretty close. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my Allen to rotate that in place, being careful to not strip things out. Nope, that's worse. I think nope. Well, isn't this just a pain? There we go. Alright, so I'm lined up. This one isn't quite big enough to go all the way through, but looking at it, this is as far as these screws go. So I'm going to put these screws in now. That way that doesn't slip on me. Metal to metal. So we're using Loctite. I'm going to hold that in place. These are tapered screws for that nice flush fit. Good. And I'm using the stainless here. Anything that's kind of external, stainless from my stainless kit. Alright, you can see, yep, those sit nice and flush on the inside. You probably can't see that super great, but they are in there, nice and flush. Alright, next up we have this little unit, which appears to be identical in either direction. It looks like it might be a little taller on one side than the other. Looking at about 3.6 mil. That's machining tolerances. Yeah, so it's the same in either direction. So we've got this little guy, which is also the same on in either way. So I believe this goes in there. Like so. Okay, so this involves one of these miserable little E-clips. Most people who've ever dealt with E-clips will tell you how much they hate them. So we're going to put this on like that, and then there's a tiny, I really don't think you'll be able to see this, there's a tiny indent right there that this E-clip needs to go over. There's only one of these in the package. If you lose this thing, you are out of luck. And they do like to spring off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of set it exactly where I want it. And I'm going to push with this set of little pliers I've got. There we go. And I heard that nice little click. So that is in there. That retains that piece. So this should go right like that, I believe. Yeah, it doesn't fit that way. So yeah, that goes right here. And then get our orientation right like that. So this pin is going to go through this outside hole right here. In like so. Alright, so we are now mating the dig unit to the transmission, and basically we're going to take this guy. So you can see this has this nice little X on it, and this has the male half of the X. So these two are going to mate together, and basically what this is going to allow it to do is this is going to transfer power to the rear wheels, and basically with the dig on, this piece will hold it out, so it will have four-wheel drive, and when you turn the dig off, it pulls it that way, and that disconnects the rear wheels. So we have to put this drive shaft in first. This does matter which way it goes. There's kind of some rounded off edges on the side that goes towards the dig unit. We drop that. There's definitely some play because we've only got one screw in. So let's try putting this in the other side first. Okay, so that slots in, woo, nice and cleanly right there. Yeah, okay, so you definitely want to put that piece in the dig unit first. So that slotted all the way in nice and firm. You can see we've got our little pinhole on that side. And then these two are just going to slot together. And this should turn, I believe. Okay, so with it spaced out, it spins freely. When it gets pulled back in, it will mate with that little X section that we installed back here with those two screws. So that's how it freezes the whole system up. That way it spins mostly freely. Right in the middle it spins freely. If you pull it that way, it locks it out. If you go that way, it locks it out. So you've got four-wheel drive, brake, and freewheel, basically. So this piece, okay, so we need to thread this piece on to that. Yeah, we'll be able to do that in place, I think. So we're gonna put some of our screws in. This goes long, short. So the short one is going up top, and the long ones are going in the bottom, I believe. Yeah. Yep, the short one's going in the top. Alright, so now we have to put this little piece on here, which this is just going to be a hand thread. Wonderful. Alright, so luckily there is a little flat spot on the shaft for me to hold. So definitely do this before you put this rod through. So I'm going to grab that with my little needle nose pliers here to keep the rod from spinning, and then we'll just spin it right on. Damn. I don't think this shaft is too sensitive to scratching. It's not like a shock shaft where you wouldn't want to do this, but this still isn't ideal. And I'm definitely getting some scratching. I'm just not getting enough force. Actually, I think I just bent my pliers. Oh yeah, that's fun. Alright, we will step it up a notch to the big pliers. This is certainly overkill for this application. Yeah, they're so big it's actually making it harder. But they are not going to bend or let go. So we're just going to thread it till we're at the end of the threads and call it good. It's getting pretty hard. Anytime you've got something with a nice hole in it, you can always use it to get a little extra leverage. All right. And we definitely put a few Mars in there, but I don't think that matters at all. Spins freely, but that side isn't. If we push it all the way over, yeah, there we go. See, once it's all the way over, it's spinning all of the shafts. You disconnect it, you're in neutral, you can spin the rear, you pull it all the way over, it locks it in, and that locks it out. Oh, that is a nice little dig unit. Yeah. And now that I have it together, these are going in a little further. Whenever you do a step like this where you're doing this kind of stuff, I always recommend you go through and check your tightness on all your screws just to make sure you didn't miss anything like I missed that one. And that is our transmission. Alright, so next we are assembling the slipper clutch. Now, if you are doing this and you actually want the slipper clutch to function, you're going to need to do a little more tweaking than I am doing. I wanted to get a slipper clutch delete, however, I was unable to. So I'm going to do a trick I've seen some other people talk about, is basically I'm going to put these on and I'm going to super glue them in place, and then I'm going to crank it down as hard as I can. So these little guys are your friction pads. They have adhesive on one side. Take the adhesive off, line it up with your gear here, and press that into place like so. And then repeat for the other side. And drop it into place. So those are in. That one does not want to sit quite as flush. And then basically these go on here and keep the whole thing from moving. So they're, now I'm feeling a little less enthused about super gluing it. I think I'm just going to crank it down really tight and skip the super glue. So take our assembled transmission. These are kind of oval holes, so you got to spin them. Put that on. Put that like that. Put that on, find where it lines up. It lines up somewhere. Looks like it should go this way. There it goes. It takes a little force to get that one on. You've got this little plastic spacer cuff and a nylock nut. This nylock nut is yet another piece that did not come with the RC screws kit, so I continue to be more and more let down by this kit. Alright, that is a small one. I'm going to get a tire driver out for that. Okay, so that's a 7. And we are going to spin that down. This is going to be tricky to get to spin down. Well, not moving. Okay, so I think what I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to stick one of my smaller drivers through this lower transmission pin, like that, to hold it in place. And this will stop that shaft from rotating, letting me turn it down. There we go. So if you want your slipper clutch to actually function, you're going to need to finesse this a little bit. If you want it to just be rock solid, just crank on it pretty much as hard as you can. Alright, that should not move. If that moves, I'll be surprised. Alright. Sounds good. You spin it. They're spinning. This side's not because it's disconnected, but if you wiggle it around, there you go. Now they're both spinning. Good. Alright, I'm putting, I believe it would be referred to as the idler gear on. So, this does involve a very tiny little shim here. That's going to be fun to work with. So we've got our idler gear here. You press your bearings into this guy. Oh boy, this is going to be a tight one, I think. If you don't get it right the first time, it's probably not going to work. So we're going to put that flat. We're going to push the gear onto it. That's better. Repeat with the other side. Oh, that one is relatively loose. Alright, this doesn't matter which way it goes. It's unidirectional. put this on through the middle. We'll put our shim on the transmission side. Amazing that such a tiny shim can make any difference whatsoever, but it can. So this piece now it wants us to grease again, and then we're going to put the other half on. So our grease back out. I'm going to drop this in, making sure I put the shim down. Like that. There we go. Now, put this cover on. Like so. That seats nice and cleanly. You've got two different length screws here again. You've got a longer and two shorters. The longer goes on the top up here. Alright, welcome back. For you, it's probably been 2 seconds. I'm trying a different camera angle here. I got a nice convenient ceiling mount. I have a nice low drop ceiling over my workbench here. So we're going to give this a try. I think it'll work out a little better. It's easier for me to build. I don't have to look around the camera, and I think it'll work out just as well. Actually, I think it'll be better in the end. So now we are installing our motor. So I'll put my motor product spotlight right here. We're to the motor mount. So for a motor, I've chosen a brushed Holmes Hobbies Crawlmaster 540 Pro in the 20 turn variety. These are very nice brushed motors. This one comes in at right around $100. They are rebuildable. You've got removable brushes right here. So if you smoke your brushes, you can actually just pop those out and put new ones in that Holmes Hobbies sells. They also have a very good YouTube channel that will tell you anything you could want to know about these motors, way more than I know. These are rebuildable. These are hand wound in the USA. This is a 5-slot motor. Not quite as much torque as a 3-slot, but more controllability, which is what I'm looking for. These are hand wound in the US by Holmes Hobbies. Very good motor. I've also got both a 9 and an 11 turn pinion here. Some people say the 11's the lowest you can go, but others say if you play around with the motor mount, you can get the 9 in by doing no modification. The other thing, some of you may say, and why are you putting Traxxas pinions on here? So I know these fit this drive shaft. I wasn't sure if some of the other options did, but the Traxxas metal is not super great, and by putting cheaper steel in, if I strip something, I'll blow the pinion first because I'm going to lock the slipper clutch out. So I'd rather just smoke a $3 Traxxas part than something deeper into the transmission. We've got our completed transmission. One of the things I want to note from the last section is by not covering this gear in grease and doing all of the greasing inside, it makes this step a hell of a lot cleaner than if you've greased that. So this pinion is actually going to fit straight through. So this is a 9-turn pinion. I'm hoping this will work. It may not. I've read some differing opinions online of whether or not this will work or not. Some people say it does, others say it doesn't. You got to play with the motor mount mounting position. So we're going to give it a try. This is a piece that you generally Loctite. So we will be doing that. Grub screws. Actually, this grub screw came pre-Loctited because it's Traxxas, and they assume you don't know what you're doing. And it is smaller than that one. It looks like it's a 1.5 mil. It sure is. Sorry about my framing. Still getting used to the new camera location. So we're going to thread this in here. One of the things you do want to make sure when you're putting grub screws on is that your motor's output shaft has a flat side. You need the grub screw to go onto the flat side. If it does not, you will have problems where your pinion slips off. So we've got this on pretty tight. I would have thought that went in a little more. We're also not quite sure if that needs to sit completely flush with the motor or if we need a little bit of offset. I'm going to err on the side of caution and give it a little offset to reduce the friction, but we'll have to check our gear mesh momentarily. So motor just slots through like this, and you can see, although we've got our 2 slots here and we have 2 slots on each side, so supposedly if you play with those slots you can make it line up. So the answer to where the pinion needs to be is much further out. So we're going to slide that out. And I believe as long as the grub screw is making contact, it looks a little funky, but that shouldn't be a problem because it would just spin freely. The grub screw is pretty much doing all of your holding, and that's pretty good, but I want to come back a little more. You want those teeth to mesh very cleanly. Alright, that's nearly imperceptible to the eye, but I think that's what we need. And I'll turn my GoPro light on here so you can see a little bit better. This does, sorry about that, caused a little overheating on my camera, but that looks like it's going to be just perfect right there. So I'm going to crank that way down before it slips on me. There we go. And now we're going to play with these motor mount locations and see if we can make this work. So the mesh looks pretty good, and I do believe it's going to work just fine. I don't see why this would be a problem. I know the manual says you're not supposed to go to below a 9 turn, but I don't see a reason that you can't do a 9 turn. I'm going to put just a dab of our Loctite on here. You really don't want to go too much on this because you're going into the motor, and you don't want any liquids in there, obviously. Just a little dab. And what you're really going to want to do here is start them both before tightening anything down and not mess it up like I just did. Alright, now I'm going to have to put this on the table, I think, to do this step, so sorry if it's a little far from the camera. Some things you just need to brace off the ground for, though. Or your desk, in this case. Alright, so once I get one of them in, because you've got that little slide there, it shouldn't matter as long as you get the right one. Most motors have 2 different screw holes, so just make sure you hit the right one and give it a little bit of tension. I'm going to slide that over. Now, setting gear meshes, there's a million videos out there on how to set your gear mesh. You want a little play, but not a lot. We're going to put the other screw in first before I really get to setting that. Alright, so I'm a little too tight to be able to play with the mesh still, so I'm just going to back them off a little bit each. I don't want them to come out. So now I can kind of freely slide the motor. So for your gear mesh, a lot of times you can do the the paper trick, where you stick a piece of paper in there and you you let it run through. I've done enough of them where I can kind of just do it by eyeball at this point. And if this was greasy, this would really suck. So you really kind of just gotta, if you're too tight, you're gonna get some premature wear going on. That's too loose. Right about there I think I like, so I'm gonna tighten these down without moving anything. And now I'm gonna just check my gear mesh. I've got a little bit of play. That's a little more than I like. I'm gonna go a little tighter. If you do this wrong, you're gonna blast through gears. The Traxxas pinions here should be a fair bit softer, I think, than the Axial ones. So if I strip anything here, it should be the pinion, which is a pretty easy, cheap fix. You know, you'd only have to take it apart to this stage to fix it. Alright, that's looking a little better. You know, it's really hard to see what exactly I'm doing here because it's such detailed work, but or such small motions, but I think that's right. Yeah, that looks good to me. And see, I'm starting to turn it now. I'm getting the grease coming in. I don't want to play with that, so I'm going to stop turning it. I'm going to give that grub screw one more little tweak, make sure it's in. And that should do it for that part. So now we get to put the final cover on our transmission case. Just like so. Going into plastic again. So no thread locker needed. Alright, and that is our completed motor and transmission. We've got to do the Dig Servo next. I'm going to get that set up. We'll be right back. Alright, so we are doing the Dig unit now. If you are electing to not have a Dig and just being four-wheel all the time, you'll skip this step entirely. I am going to be using the EcoPower Micro Servo. This is the ECP 827. Nice little micro servo from EcoPower. It can handle up to 8.4 volts, which means my ESC, which is going to be pushing out 7.4, I believe, will be able, it won't fry this. By default, Axial wants you to use the SPM SX-X107, which is not included. That's one of theirs. I read it's pretty bad. So I just went straight for the EcoPower. The other interesting thing that I haven't seen anybody mention, in fact I've seen people mention the opposite, is that if you buy the non-Axial servo, you have to buy the Dig mount servo saver set right here. All of these pieces are actually in this kit as of August 2022. So you do not need to appear to buy any of the servo mounts, because this is the ones I bought. These are the ones that came out of the package, along with the spring and the servo horn and the top of the servo saver and everything. So you do not need to buy that little kit. Save yourself a few bucks. Alright, so we're going to get after it. I'm going to start with the servo horn. Another interesting fact is this screw is called out in the diagram, but it's not listed on the left-hand panel right here. It's not in this list anywhere, even though it is listed right there, but it is in the bag that comes with the kit. So that threw me for a little bit of a loop, so just be aware. So This is a case as well with this stainless steel screw kit that I do not have any button heads that are this small or any little nylock nuts. So that is another kind of failure of this screw kit. The more I go along, the less pleased I am with it. Unfortunately, it was advertised as a kit for everything you need. I'm sure finding a lot of things that are not present, unfortunately. I would like to see them change that in the future. I'm doing a metal thread here, but a nylock nut, you can identify them. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, it's pretty small, but you can identify them by the little plastic ring on the inside. You do not need to Loctite these. The nylock, the plastic ring in there functions as nylock. It basically makes it so you're going into plastic instead of metal. It's actually a rubber. You really don't need to worry about that. Alright, got that half of the servo mount done. Now we're going to assemble our servo saver. Try to do this a little closer to the camera. You spring first. And you've got this guy on top. A screw, which I forgot to grab. We need ending in So what I'm going to do is, this was a 2.5 by 12. I'm going to grab my 2.5 by 12 that's supposed to be in there and check the threads to see if this matches. It does not. This is much bigger. Okay. So that's, I might be very happy that I bought the kit, because I may have just stripped this out. What we're going to need is we're going to need the screw that came with the servo here. Not these silver ones. We want this guy. Get those out of the way. With all these useless servo horns. And we'll check this. This should, that is 1.5. Okay. Alright, see, that threads in nicely. I suspect I probably just ruined this. Which explains why it was so hard to thread in. Okay, I'm going to rebuild this with that one. And I'll be right back. Alright, sorry about that. I did indeed use the wrong screw. Luckily I managed to not strip anything though. So that was a close call on that one. So I've got this on and assembled now. And if you've got any force going through here, you're using the wrong screw. So at this point you can see our tension is pretty high, pretty low on our servo saver, so I'm going to turn this screw down. This should be much less tension. I'm not going to go too far though. I really don't foresee this as ever slipping, so I think that gap there, and I've turned my GoPro light off again, that gap there, sorry about the shaking, I don't think that gap will be a problem. Like, if it takes that much force to move, I think we're good. Alright, so continuing, we've got the servo horn on and oriented properly. We need to put the mount on, and this is the piece that previously did not come with the kit, but it does now, which is great. Like to see the inclusion of those kind of things, that way you don't have to go out and buy a little bag that a lot of people are not going to realize they need. So this is going to bolt up just there. You got to make sure you get these on the right sides. They are different shapes. Sorry, I keep being a little too far from the camera. Alright, so we're just going to thread that one in, and the same on the other side. Should be straightforward. There we go, nice and smooth. That's what we want to see. And I'm definitely not going to over tighten those. Those small little threads can really strip easily. Oh, interesting. Okay, so I was a bit concerned briefly there because of the wire and this, but this is actually specifically cut to avoid that wire, which is great. That could have been a problem if they had not done that otherwise. Sorry, I gotta stay on camera. And I gotta get this going on the ground first. No way around it. This side is definitely trickier than the other due to the wire. I'm gonna pin that back. So it's attempt to pin that back. We'll fold it under. There we go. Put that right there. There we go. That's another little bit of a boy, this is a tricky one. Alright, I'm going to float it and see if I can get it to go this way. There we go, that's better. I bet if you put this in a small vise, that would also be pretty easy. Oh, as far as how I got this apart, I had to get out the huge needle nose pliers to clamp onto the bottom here. I've definitely got some marring on the bottom of my servo saver, but it's plastic and it doesn't matter, so it's okay. There we go, and we are on. Alright, so this piece, this flange here, or I don't know what to call that. It goes like this into this piece, and let's see, whoa, it spins around, making it a little trickier. There we go. Just like that. It doesn't seem to say which side it should go on. I assume it's probably gonna move back and forth as time goes on. So there is our completed transmission, motor, and dig. It does include some diagrams here about the spacing between four-wheel drive and dig on. I can't do much about that until we have the electronics actually hooked together. Alright, so now we're going to take our completed unit and we're going to put it into the beginnings of our frame, our chassis. Exciting times. So this is pretty straightforward. 6 screws of varying lengths. These are all going to be stainless. So we need, get my handy pliers out. They're stainless for me. You can use that kit, the non-stainless if you wish. That is completely up to you. And actually, I have this beautiful skid plate that has to go on later. Okay. Alright, I'm going to grab all the screws. Alright, I've got all of our screws, so at this point we're going to be mounting our transmission, motor, and dig unit to the chassis. I am also going to be installing this skid plate This is stainless steel off of Amazon. This came out of the same kit that the diff skid plates came out of. Cheap, easy upgrade. I like putting nice stainless kits on the bottom. Really protects all this plastic from hanging up on stuff. So we'll be putting this on as well at this point. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. So we need to make sure this is oriented properly. And we've got, per the manual, it goes this way. This goes this way. Okay, and we've got these little tiny pegs here are for these pegs on the Dig Servo. So you got to make sure you line those up as well. And these can pivot. So that one needs to be, so in order to get this to line up here, it doesn't really, yeah, it kind of shows it, but you need to turn these 90 degrees, this one at least. This one is oriented correctly. So I'm kind of starting by lining the dig unit up because it's kind of the most finicky bit. Alright, I felt something pop into place. Yeah, I think we, whoop, and even further into place. Okay, so that looks good. Now, with this optional skid plate, there is one screw hole that is not visible through it, and it is this one right here. So I'm going to put that one on first. Let's see, and that one is, let's see, so there's a few different sizes here that all go in the bottom. We need to make sure we get the right ones in the right places. There's two different sizes that go in the bottom. This one short guy is the smaller one, so it looks like I'm orienting as the photo is, which is this way. And it looks like this one is long. Okay, that's a long one. These two are long ones, so I think this is the short one. Okay, yeah, so we're putting a long screw in there. Again, if you, well, actually you would have to do this even if you weren't putting the skid plate on, but you wouldn't have to be quite so specific with your order. And you could certainly bolt this option part on later after the fact, but you'd then have to take all these out, and why would you want to do that if you don't need to? Okay. Alright, so now we're going to put this on. There's only one way this goes on. Line your holes up. Like so. And because these are stainless, this is going to look super nice. So our short screw, this is our short screw. We're going to put the short screw in first so we don't lose track of it. Alright, sorry about that. My camera overheated again, and I needed a battery change. I also took that time to prep the next stage. So, I've gotten the motor, transmission, and dig unit all mounted up. Almost all mounted up, sorry. I've got two more screws to do right here. I'm going to put the two Dig Servo screws in to make sure that doesn't move on us. But other than that, it's all done. with the skid plate. I suspect the skid plate might actually give me a few problems later on in the build process, because I think I'm going to have to access those right there. I'm hoping I can do it from this side. We will see when we get that far. I'm going to lay out the next step and put those 2 screws in, and we'll keep on moving.